Sharon.
What?
Sharon won't be here today, tomorrow, and Monday.
Right.
And those get passed out
Tomorrow.
okay.
I'm not sure what you need up here.
Pardon me?
Is everything okay?
Yeah.
Great.
Do you want me to leave these here or give it to you each day?
Oh no, I already have them.
You do?
I think. These are for the
Oh,
person
for
who's
the-
back there to have. Like, that is for you.
I'm not passing out alley-oop.
No.
Oh, okay.
It's, we make sure that I already have everything I need up here before Shabbat.
I gotcha. All right.
So I've got it, it's all set.
I would not have come up on the beam.
No, not at all. No problem at
I
all.
haven't touched anything.
That's okay. It's all good.
No, I want to be sure I'm doing halachically with the compliance.
Yeah. Yeah, let me just make sure 100% that I have everything. I have the birthdays, anniversaries, and yard sites.
She has it.
Have this for tomorrow. Have this for today.
Ah,
This is for today. These are for tomorrow. This is for tomorrow. All right. Yep, I've got everything I need.
okay, so I don't have to come back up again.
Nope, all good. All good.
Okay. The, Mike said he was told to be here at 8:45. I said, that's crazy.
That is true. No reason to be here before 9:30.
Okay, I said between 9:15 and 9:30.
That's fine.
So I could change that, but I just 8:45 is ridiculous.
Yeah.
And he'll be here tomorrow. I don't know who's coming Monday.
Okay.
Somebody will be here.
Somebody will be here. All right. Oh, I'm glad you're going to be up here with me. I like it when you are up here with me. It's very nice. Okay. Shabbat shalom. Shabbat shalom. Shabbat shalom.
Rabbi, do you know if Sharon actually acts as the usher, greeting people? Then I'll sit back there.
You don't have to. You can.
I see, it has cat hair on it. Are your in-laws in?
No.
Okay, I wasn't even gonna ask about your parents. I figured your mother was working.
Yeah. No, we don't have any family. It's just us. Which is stressful enough. I said, which is hard enough with Passover.
Yeah, it is.
Love Passover. It's my favorite holiday.
And I can't believe that you're still doing the online Seder, what do you call it? Zoom Seder.
Yeah, we're going to do virtual Seder tomorrow. At 5:15. Second Seder. Yeah,
Do you know how many people are coming?
I know. I know how many people were Shabbat Shalom, and welcome to Congregation Agudat Achim's live stream and in-person Shabbat morning service. It is 9:45 and therefore time to begin, so we will. Aryeh Koravar is going to be leading us this morning in our Shacharit service. Whether you're joining us in the room or by live stream, we welcome you. It is good to be together in community with you, and we are grateful for the opportunity to be together on this Shabbat Hagadol. I'm going to come back to this, but the reason why Shabbat Hagadol is called Hagadol, the Great Shabbat, is because of course, it is the Shabbat before Passover, but the reason why it's called Hagadol is because the sermon is at great length. In fact, not too long ago, just around 100 years ago, it was traditional for rabbis only to preach as a part of worship services twice a year, and that would be on the Shabbat before Yom Kippur and on the Shabbat before Passover. And so rabbis, of course, always taught at many different times, but not traditionally as part of the Shabbat morning service. Rabbis giving a drasha, a sermon, as part of the Shabbat morning service is actually something that migrated into Judaism from our surrounding cultural reference points of Christianity and Islam. It happened relatively late. But traditionally, Shabbat Hagadol and Shabbat Shuvah were the times where the rabbi gave an extensive discourse. And so later on, I will be giving my long, extensive discourse to prepare for the holiday of Passover. This morning we'll begin our service on page 54 with Baruch She'amar, page 54.
Baruch She'amar v'yahaolam Baruch Hu. Yachid Chelami Melech Mishabachim Fare Achimo Hagadol Baruch Atah Adonai Melech Mechulal Batish Bachot.
We continue with Nishmat on page 334, page 334.
Nishmat Kol Chai Tevarech et Shipar Eloheinu.
Nishmat Kol Chai.
Nalecha un shabechacha un farecha varech et Shem kodecha mor leDavid Baruchi nafshi Adonai v'chol kravai et Shem kodsho ha'el b'tatu moduzecha hagadol b'chvod shemecha hagibor lenetzach b'nortecha hamelech hayoshev al kisei ram v'nisa.
The formal chanting of the Shacharit service begins on page 336 at the bottom with the words Shochen Ad.
Shochen Ad Marom L'Kadosh Shemo.
Shochen Ad Marom L'Kadosh Shemo.
B'fi Yisharim Tit Halal U'divrei Tzadikim Tit Barach U'b'lashon Chasidim Tit Romam U'v'kerech Kedoshim Tit Kadash
V'makahalo trivut amchaved Yisrael.
Shechein chova kol yishrim lefanecha na Eloheinu v'Elohei avotenu leodol elele shabeach v'far lamem lader levarech lelo kales al kol divrei shirot batish ba'achot David ben Yishai avdecha meshichecha.
We rise for Yishtabach, page 338. Please rise.
Yishtabach shimcha la'ad malkeinu.
Yishtabach Shimcha.
Berachot v'hodaot me'taved olam Baruch atah Adonai El melech gadol batish ba'achot El harot adon haniflaot Habocher b'shrei zimra Melech elchei ha'olamim.
We continue on page 340, the first bracha before Kriyat Shema. You may be seated.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam Yotzer or uvrei choshech Oseh shalom uvrei hakol.
You may be seated as we continue on the bottom of page 340.
Ein kercha ve'en zlotecha efes b'lecha midom alach Ein kercha na Eloheinu b'olam hazeh ve'en zlotecha malkeinu lefei olam haba Efes b'lecha golenu lemot hamashiach ve'einu melecha me'oshienu letiyat hametim.
El Adonai kol hamasim baruch u'mvorach v'fi kol neshama gadol v'tuvo malei olam datu tvunaso v'vimoto.
Hamikah al chayot hakodesh v'neder b'chavod al hamerchava zechud u'mishor lifnei chiso chesed v'rachamim lifnei chodo tovim me'or shebara Eloheinu yitzaram v'dad b'bina u'haskel koach u'gvura natan b'harem Moshlim
b'kerev tevel
Meleim zir umfikim noga Naziram
Zivam
bechol
bechol ha'olam
Semechim b'tzeitam B'sasim b'voam Osim b'eim ha'ritzon konam Pe'er b'chavod Nonim lishmot zalav
Verina lezecher malchuto kara Hashemesh ha'yizrach ora V'hikim surat havana
Shevat nonim lo kol sevam aram Tiferet ugdula
Serafim ve'ofanim ve'chayot ha'kodesh
Le'el asher
Shabbat mikol ha'masim.
Tibarach Moshinu asher b'maseh yadecha ve'al me'orei or Shasita Yefaruch Hasela
Yibarach
Surenu Malkeinu V'Gololenu.
Page 344.
Kulam Alvim Kulam Berim Kulam Gurim V'Kulim Moshe B'Yama Uriah V'Zon Kanam V'Kulam Potim Epihem B'Kedushav Torah V'Shirav Zimra U'Parhim U'Shavchim Farim U'Maritzim Makdishim U'Mamlichim
Et Shem Ha'el HaMelech HaGadol.
Zazen Nakdishot Sham B'Nachat Ruach V'Zchabra U'V'Nakadosha Kulam B'Charonim V'Omrim B'Yirah
Kadosh, 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 Adonai Tzva'ot Haaretz Kevodo.
V'Haofanim V'Chayot HaKodesh B'Rash Gadol Minasim U'Masarafim L'Matam Meshapim V'Omrim
Baruch Kevod Adonai Mimkomo.
Le'el Baruch Nimot Yitenu.
El Baruch Adonai Mimkomo.
Or Chadash al Sion Ta'ir, V'niskeh kulanu mehera le'ro, Baruch atah Adonai, Yotzer HaMe'orot. Ahava Rabbah Haftanu, Adonai Eloheinu, Chemna Gdola V'Teira, Chamad Aleinu, Avinu Malkeinu, Avor Avoteinu, Shebatu V'cha, Avinu Malkeinu, V'telamdenu kechaim, Ken techonenu tlamdenu, Avinu Avarachaman, Hamrachem Rachem Aleinu, V'ten v'libeinu lehavin, Lehavinu l'haschil lishmoa, Hilmodu lelamed, Lishmor v'latzot, Ukayem et kol divrei, Talmud Toratecha v'yava, V'ha'ereinu b'toratecha, V'dabek dveinu b'tzotecha, V'yachei levaveinu le'ahava u'yirat shemecha, V'lo nevosh le'olam va'ed, V'lo nevosh le'olam va'ed, Ki v'shem kodshecha, Hagadol v'hanora b'tachnu, Nagila v'nismecha, Nagila v'nismecha v'yeshuatecha, V'havienu le'shalom, me'arba kanfot ha'aretz, V'tolicheinu komemiyut me'artzeinu, Ki el poel yeshuotata, Uvanu v'charta mikol am v'lashon, V'keravtanu l'shimcha hagadol, Sela be'emet, Le'hodo lecham, Uyachedcha be'yahava, Baruch atah Adonai, habocher b'yamo Yisrael be'yahava. Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai echad. Ve'yavta et Adonai Elohecha, b'chol lavcha u'b'chol nafshecha, u'b'chol me'odecha, ve'hayu hadvarim ha'elem, Asher Anochi metzavecha, hayom al levavecha, v'shinantam levanecha, v'nibarta bam, v'shivtecha b'beitecha, v'lechtecha b'derech, v'shokbecha u'chumecha, v'ksartam le'oda yadecha, v'hayu totafot v'ninecha, v'ktavtam, Amizot beitecha u'visharecha, Vayam. Ani Adonai lechem emet. Emet v'yisi v'yachron v'yam v'shar v'neman v'huva. Ledor vador hu kiyam ashmo kayam v'kisonachon moto v'morto la'ad kayamet. Udvarav chayim v'kayamim. Emet chatar na Eloheinu v'Elohei Avotenu, Malkeinu melech Avotenu goleinu go Avotenu, Yotzreinu tzorotenu, Kodenu maslenu melam shemecha, Ein Elohim zulatecha, Ezrat Avotenu, Atahu me'olam.
Page 350.
Ki lo le'oyon, Baruch u'mvarach, Moshe b'nei Yisrael, Lechan Yishra, B'simcha rabba ve'amru kulam. Mi chamocha ba'elim Adonai, Mi chamocha nedar ba'kodesh, Nora tilot osef eleh. Shira chadasha shibchu gulim, L'shimcha asafat hayam, Yachad kulam hoduvim lechu v'yamru, Adonai yimloch le'olam va'ed. Zur Yisrael, Kuma be'ezrat Yisrael, Uvdei Hinu Mecha, Yehuda ve'Yisrael, Go Aleinu, Adonai Tzavot Shemo, Kedosh Yisrael, Baruch Atah Adonai, Ga'a Yisrael.
We join together with Aryeh for the Amidah for Shabbat morning, page 354. After the Kedusha, we continue with the individual whispered Amidah.
Baruch Atah Adonai, Eloheinu v'Elohei Avotenu, Elohei Avraham, Elohei Yitzchak, Elohei Yaakov, Elohei Sarah, Elohei Rivka, Elohei Rachel, Elohei Leah, Ha'el Hagadol, Hagibor v'Hanora, El Elyon, Gomer Chasadim Tovim v'Konei HaKol, V'Zocher Chazdei Avot, Umevi Goel Livnei V'neihem, L'man Shemo V'Yava, Melech Ozer U'Moshiach Magen. Baruch Atah Adonai, Magen Avraham Uvokei Sarah, Atah Gibor Le'olam Adonai, Mechayei Metim Asher Rav Le'Oshia, Mashif HaRuach, U'Mori HaGashem, Mechakel Chaim B'Chesed, Mechayei Metim B'Rachamim Rabim, Somech Noflim V'Rofei Cholim, Umatir Asurim, Umekayem Emunato, Lishenei Afar, Michamocha Ba'al Kivurot, Umidom Elach, Melech Meimit, Umechayem, Umatzmiach Yeshua, Neman Atal Chayot Metim, Baruch Atah Adonai, Mechayei HaMetim. Mekadesh Babalam, Kishem Shemakdishim Otobik Marom, Kakatuva Yaniviacha, Karazal Zev, Beamar, Kadosh, 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 Adonai Tzvaot, Melech Haaretz Kevodo. Az Beko Rosh Gadol, Adir V'Chazak Masmi'im Kol, Yasimu Masrafim, Numatam Baruch Yameru.
Baruch Adonai Yikomo.
Yimkomcha Malkeinu, Malkeinu Tofia, V'timloch Aleinu, Kimecha Kimanachnu Lach, Yimkomcha Malkeinu, Malkeinu Tofia, V'timloch Aleinu, Kimecha Kimanachnu Lach. Matai, Matai, Timloch Betzion. Matai, Matai, Timloch Betzion. Bekarov beyamenu, Bekarov beyamenu, Leolam va'er tishkon. Bekarov beyamenu, Bekarov beyamenu, Leolam va'er tishkon. Tikada v'tikadash b'toch Yerushalayim ircha. L'dor v'ador u'lenetzach u'lenetzach netzachim. V'einenu tire'ena malchutecha. Kadavar hamor b'shirei uzecha. Al yedei David Mashiach tikecha.
Yimloch Adonai le'olam, Elohai Tzion, Ledor Vador, Hallelujah.
L'dor vador nagigod lecha, u'lenetzach netzachim kedushacha nafdish, v'shivchacha Elohim pinu l'mishlelam v'ed, ki al-melech gadol v'kadosh ata, baruch atah Adonai,
Ha'el HaKadosh. If you haven't completed your individual whispered Amidah, please continue davening. We join together for Kaddish Shalem, page 392.
Ikadal vikara shmei rabba.
Amen.
Ve'almadi rakute ve'lim panchute v'chayechono mechono v'chayedocho b'Yisrael v'galav makari v'yimaru.
Amen.
Yehi shmei rabba mevarach.
Le'alam al me'almaya yiparach.
Yiparach v'yishtabach v'yitapa'ar v'tunam v'naseh v'yithadar v'yithaleh v'yithalal shmei dekudashah.
Very good.
Leila mikol brachata v'shirata tushbechata v'nechemata damiram be'alma v'imeru.
Amen.
Titkabal shon uthon d'chol Yisrael kadam v'hon v'yishmai v'imeru.
Amen.
Yehei shlomo rabba mitzvah v'chayim aleinu v'kol Yisrael v'imeru.
Amen.
Oseh shalom b'mramam ba'av hu yaseh shalom aleinu v'kol Yisrael v'imeru.
Amen. We continue with the Psalm for Shabbat, page 32.
Hayom Yom Shabbat Kodesh Shebo Hayu Havim Omrim B'Veit HaMikdash Mizmor Shir LeYom HaShabbat. Ordinuvu B'Sheva Dashim Rananimiu Lagike Sharana Turivel as Avlata Bo.
Kaddish Avelim, Mourner's Kaddish, page 52. Yitgadal, Yitkadash, Shemei Rabbah, Ve'alma Zivra, Kirute, Ve'amlich Malchute, V'chayechon u'vyomechon u'v'chayei d'chol Beit Yisrael, V'agalau v'izman kari v'imru Amen. Yehi Shmei Rabbah Mevarach, Le'alam u'lamei almaya. Yitbarach, v'yishtabach, v'yitpa'ar, v'yitromam, v'yitnaseh, v'yitadar, v'yitaleh, v'yitalal, Shmei dekudesha brichu. Leila min kol birchata v'shirata, tushbechata v'nechmata, damiran be'alma v'imru Amen. Yehi shlama rabba min shemaya, v'chayim aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael v'imru Amen. Oseh shalom b'mromav, hu yaseh shalom, aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael v'imru Amen. Yasher Koach to Aryeh for leading us in Shacharit. Aryeh will also be leading us in the Torah service. And welcome to everybody to Congregation Agudat Achim's in-person and live stream Shabbat morning service. My name is Rabbi Rafi Spitzer. It's a pleasure to welcome you this morning. Whether you're joining us in the room or by live stream, it is a pleasure to be in community with you. We will also be meeting tomorrow morning on Sunday, the first day of Pesach, at 9:45. This morning we did not have a minyan at 9:45 when we began our service. I hope that people can come tomorrow so that we have a minyan for our Passover service. And also we will be meeting on Monday, which is the second day of Passover, also Yom Tov. And I hope that we also have enough folks in the room that we have a minyan and can do all of the parts of the service that you need a minyan to do. It is our custom now to limit the exposure of multiple people on the beam at a time, that we have the person who's reading Torah, which today is Howie Middleman, to take the Torah out of the ark and to do Hagbah. We do Hagbah at the beginning of the service so that anybody who has been honored with an aliyah to the Torah has a visual recognition of the text of the Torah and is therefore able to say the blessings with that visual recognition in mind. We turn now to page 394 for the service for taking the Torah out of the ark.
Ein kamocha Elohim Adonai ve'ein kemasecha malchutecha malchut kol olamim u'memshaltecha bechol dor vador. Adonai melech, Adonai malach, Adonai yimloch le'olam va'ed, Adonai oz le'amo yitain, Adonai yivarech et amo v'shalom, rachamim heitiva birtzoncha et Zion, tivnei chomot Yerushalayim, tivnei chomot Yerushalayim, ki v'cha levad batachnu, melech el ram v'nisa Adon ha'olamim.
We rise as the Torah, as the ark is opened.
Vayhi bin so Aharon, vayomer Moshe, Kuma Adonai, ve'yafutzu oivecha, ve'yanusu mesanecha mipanecha, ki mitzion teitzei Torah, ki mitzion teitzei Torah, udvar Adonai mirushalayim, Baruch shenatan Torah, Torah, Baruch shenatan Torah, Torah, le'amo Yisrael b'kedushato. Shema. Be'yanarachet ve'lishmei kadisha yakira anai martus bechan yehera ava kadamach detiv tachli beyoraita V'tashli mishalim delibi deliba dechol amach Yisrael letavu chayim v'lishma. Amen. Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad.
Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad.
Echad Eloheinu, Gadol Adonenu, Kadosh Shemo.
Echad Eloheinu, Gadol Adonenu, Kadosh Shemo.
Galul Adonai Iti, Baron Mema Shemo Yachdav Lecha Adonai Hagedula V'Hagevura V'Hatiferet V'Hanetzach V'Hod Ki Kol B'Shamayim U'Ba'aretz Lecha Adonai Hamamlacha V'Havinaseh Lechol Merosh Romemu, 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 Romemu Adonai Eloheinu V'Ishtachavu, V'Ishtachavu Lahadom Raglav Kadoshu Romemu, Romemu Adonai Eloheinu V'Ishtachavu, V'Ishtachavu Lehar Kodsho Ki Kadosh Adonai Eloheinu.
Vayazor v'yagin Yoshia l'chol chosim bo v'nomar. Yes, I forgot. Please remain standing as the Torah is lifted for Hagba, and make sure to have a visual recognition of the text. V'zot HaTorah asher sam Moshe mipnei b'nei Yisrael api Adonai miyad Moshe. You may be seated. Yasher Koch to Aryeh for leading us in Shachrit. Our service this morning continues with the reading of Parashat Tzav, the second parasha in the book of Leviticus. What did we miss at the end of last week's Torah portion? Well, we were reading through the various different kinds of sacrifices that are offered in the temple. So we missed a few of them between the end of last week's Torah portion and the beginning of this week's Torah portion. And we pick up after the guilt offering. We were in the middle of the sin offering last week. Pick up after the guilt offering, and we're up to the sacrifice of well-being, the Zevach HaShlamim. You can follow along on page 617 in our Chumash, page 617, verse 11. Vayazor v'yagin v'yoshia l'chol chosim bo v'nomar Amen. Hakol havu g'dolinu kavod laTorah Tamod.
Eliana bat Abraham Begila.
Eliana bat Avraham Begila Lalia Rishona Baruch Shnatan Torah L'ma Yisrael B'Yushato V'atem adveikim b'Adonai Elohechem Chaim kolchem hayom. Please rise. Because we didn't have a minyan at Baruchu, we didn't say Baruchu. So this is our Baruchu, the first Baruchu that we say in our service with a minyan. So we all stand as Eli does Baruchu. We are considering this our Baruchu.
Baruch Hu et Adonai HaMavorach.
Baruch Adonai HaMavorach Le'olam Va'ed.
Baruch Adonai HaMavorach Le'olam Va'ed.
You may be seated.
Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher bachar banu mikol ha'amim v'natan lanu et Torato. Baruch Atah Adonai noten ha'Torah.
Amen.
Amen. V'zot Torat Zevach HaShlamim asher yakriv l'Adonai imal todah yakrivenu v'akriv al Zevach HaTodah האכלות מצות פלולות בשמן ורקיקי מצות משוחים בשמן וסולת מורבכת חלות פלולות בשמן על חלות לחם חמץ יקריב קורבנו על זבח תודת שלמיו והקריב ממנו אחד מכל קורבן תרומה לאדוני לכהן הזורק את דם השלמים לא יהיה, ובשר זבח תודת שלמיו, ביום קורבנו יאכל, לא יניח ממנו עד בוקר.
Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher natan lanu Torah emet v'chayei olam nata b'tochenu. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen. Yashikach. Ta'amod. Esther bat Meir v'Yudit, Aliyah Hashenit. The second Aliyah can be found on page 618, chapter 7, verse 16.
ברכו את אדוני המבורך.
Baruch Adonai Baruch Le'olam Va'ed.
ברוך אדוני המבורך לעולם ועד. ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם אשר בחר בנו מכל העמים ונתן לנו את תורתו. ברוך אתה אדוני נותן התורה.
Amen.
אמן. אם נדר או נדבה, זבח קורבנו, ביום הקריבו את זבחו יאכל, וממחרת והנותר ממנו יאכל, והנותר מבשר הזבח ביום השלישי, באש ישרף, באש ישרף, אם יכול יאכל מבשר זבח שלמיו, ביום השלישי לא ירצה, והמקריב אותו לא יחשב, לא פיגול יהיה, והנפש האוכלת ממנו עוונה תישא.
ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם אשר נתן לנו תורת אמת וחיי עולם נטע בתוכנו. ברוך אתה אדוני נותן התורה.
Amen. Talmud. I'll read Pad Yosef Shoshana Tzemach, Aliyah Shalishit. The third Aliyah can be found on page 619, chapter 7, verse 19.
Baruch Adonai Hamvorach.
Baruch Adonai Baruch Le'olam Va'ed.
Baruch Adonai Hamvorach Le'olam Va'ed. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher bachar banu mikol hamim v'natan lanu et torato. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen.
אמן. והבשר אשר ייגע בכל טמא לא יאכל, באש ישרף, והבשר כל טהור יאכל בשר, והנפש אשר תאכל בשר מזבח השלמים אשר לאדוני, וטומאתו עליו, ונכרתה הנפש ההיא מעמיה, בנפש כי תיגע בכל טמא, בטומאת אדם או בהמה טמאה, או בכל שקץ טמא, ואכל מבשר זבח השלמים אשר לאדוני, ונכרתה הנפש ההיא מעמיה.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher natan lanu torat emet v'chayei olam nata b'tochenu. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen. Talmud. Bracha Chana bat Avram David de Simcha Aliyah HaRevi'it. The fourth Aliyah can be found on page 619, chapter 7, verse 22.
Baruch hu et Adonai hamavarach.
Baruch Adonai Baruch Le'olam Va'ed.
Baruch Adonai hamvarach le'olam va'ed. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech ha'olam asher bachar banu mikol ha'amim v'natan lanu et torato. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen.
אמן. וידבר אדוני אל משה לאמור, דבר אל בני ישראל לאמור, כל חלב שור וכבש ועז לא תאכלו.
וכסף.
וכבש?
וכסף.
וכסף ועז לא תאכלו, וחלב נבלה וחלב טרפה יעשה לכל מלאכה, ואוכל לא תאכלוהו, ואכול לא תאכלוהו, כי כל אוכל חלב מן הבהמה, אשר יקריב ממנו אישה לאדוני, ונכרתה הנפש האוכלת מימיה, וכל דם לא תאכלו בכל מושבותיכם, לעוף ולבהמה, כל נפש אשר תאכל, כל דם, ונכרתה הנפש ההיא מימיה.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher natan lanu Torah emet v'chayei olam, nota b'tochenu. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen. Yamod.
Mordechai ben
Chanoch v'beila, Aliyah Chamishit. The fifth Aliyah can be found on page 620, chapter 7, verse 28.
ברכו את אדוני המבורך.
Baruch Adonai Baruch Le'olam Va'ed.
ברוך אדוני המבורך לעולם ועד. ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם, אשר בחר בנו מכל העמים, ונתן לנו את תורתו. ברוך אתה אדוני נותן התורה.
Amen.
אמן. וידבר אדוני אל משה לאמור, דבר אל בני ישראל לאמור, המקריב הזבח שלמיו לאדוני, יביא את קורבנו לאדוני מזבח שלמיו, ידיו תביאנה את אישי אדוני, את החלב על החזה יביאנו, את החזה להניף אותו תנופה לפני אדוני, והקטיר הכהן את החלב המזבחה, והיה החזה לאהרון ולבניו.
ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם, אשר נתן לנו תורת אמת, וחיי עולם נטע בתוכנו. ברוך אתה אדוני נותן התורה.
Amen. Talmud. Rivka Sarah bat Moshe Pesach Vashrei Hinda Aliyah HaShishit. The sixth Aliyah can be found on page 620, chapter 7, verse 32.
Baruchu et Adonai hamborach.
Baruch Adonai Baruch Le'olam Va'ed.
Baruch Adonai hamborach le'olam va'ed. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher bachar banu mikol ha'amim v'natan lanu et toratah. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen.
אמן. ואת שוק הימין תיתנו תרומה לכהן מזבחי שלמיכם, המקריב את דם השלמים ואת החלב מבני אהרון, לא תהיה שוק הימין למנה, כי את החזה התנופה ואת שוק התרומה לקחתי מאת בני ישראל.
מזבחי שלמיהם.
ישראל מזבחי שלמיהם, ויתן אותם לאהרון הכהן לאהרון הכהן ולבניו לחוק עולם
מאת בני ישראל.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher natan lanu torat emet v'chayei olam nata b'tochenu. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen. Talmud. Shoshanat Tzemach Bar Chaim B'Feiga. Aliyah Shevi'it. The seventh Aliyah can be found on page 620, chapter 7, verse 35.
Baruchu et Adonai hamborach.
Baruch Adonai Baruch Le'olam Va'ed.
Baruch Adonai Barach Le'olam Va'ed. Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher bachar banu mikol hamim v'natan lanu et Torato. Baruch Atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen.
Amen. Zot משחית אהרון ומשחית בניו מאישי אדוני ביום הקריב אותם לכהן לאדוני אשר ציווה אדוני לתת להם ביום מושכו אותם את בני ישראל חוכת עולם לדורותם זאת התורה לעולה למנחה ולחטאת ולאשם ולמילואים ולזבח השלמים אשר ציווה אדוני את משה בהר סיני ביום צוותו את בני ישראל להקריב את קורבניהם לאדוני במדבר סיני.
Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher natan lanu Torat emet v'chayei olam nata b'tochenu. Baruch Atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen. We rise now as the ark is open for the prayer for healing, the Mishaberach. Mishaberach Avoteinu Mekor HaBracha Le'imotenu. May the source of strength, who blessed the ones before us, help us find the courage to make our lives a blessing, and let us say, Amen. Mishaberach Avoteinu Avraham Yitzchak Yaakov, Sarah Rivka Rachel V'Leah Yivrach Yerpeh Tacholim, et Shai Aviad ben Balfura, vet Fegaleah bat Minsasura, vet Shalom ben Chaya, vet Rochel bat Avram, vet Andrew Francis Parisi, vet Yudit bat Ruben Berezel, vet Sharon and Nachama bat Ruben Berezel, vet Gabriel Mordechai ben Pesi, vet Omari Gray, vet Chaya bat Dvora, vet Leah bat Dvora, vet Yakira bat Dvora, vet Bluma bat Gittel, vet Tina bat Fegala, vet Eliza bat Dina, vet Akiva ben Gittel, vet Miriam bat Malka, vet Eliyahu ben Malka, vet Bracha bat Batya, vet Miriam bat Sarah, vet Menachem Mendel ben Zipporah, vet Gershom ben Leah, vet Robert Borshwitz, vet Yoreh bat Avram Masara, vet Kyle Scheffler, vet Cecilia Lynn, vet Michal Ruth bat Tova, vet Linda Pearlstein, vet Robert Pearlstein, vet Michael Roberts, vet Eric Hurst, vet Riva Bela bat Reza, vet Sima Freda bat Chana Yenta, vet Chana Sara bat Susha Nachama, vet Shlomo Moshe ben Miriam, vet Yitamasha bat Rachel, vet Dylan Middleton, vet Yaakov Moshe ben Batya Mindel, vet Perry bat Shulamit, vet Manish Yisachar ben Rachel, vet Shmuel ben Yudit, vet Shalom ben Chaya, vet kol achalim yiglag d'shah zot HaKadosh Baruch Hu yimalei rachamim aleim lach zikam l'rapotam yishlach lahem meira refuah shema min hashamayim refuat hanefesh refuat haguf l'chol ivreihem b'gdeihem toch shar chal Yisrael b'haolam v'chazek yedidei otzkim b'torchayim shabbatim azok v'harefuah kavala v'ashta b'agal v'zman kariv and omar Amen. Mishaberach imotenu Mekor HaBracha Lavotenu. Bless those in need of healing with refuah shlema, the renewal of body, the renewal of spirit, and let us say, Amen. Chatzi Kaddish. Yitkada v'yitkada shemei Rabba. Me'amad yivach yutei v'yamlich malchutei. V'chayechonu v'yomechon. Uv'chayei d'chol Beit Yisrael. Bagala u'bizman kariv. V'meru amen. Yehi shmei Rabba mevarach. Le'alam le'almei almaya. Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yifar v'yitramam v'yitnaseh v'yitadar v'yitalev v'yitalal. Shmei d'kudesha berichu. Leila min kol berchata v'shirata, tushbechata v'nechemata, damiran ve'alma, v'imeru. Amen.
Ya'amod.
Raphael, Pinchas, Elazar. Raphael,
Raphael.
Pinchas,
Simcha.
Pinchas,
Pincha.
Pinchas,
Pinchas.
Elazar,
Elazar.
Ben Aaron,
Ben Aaron.
Veharav,
Veharav.
Miriam,
Miriam.
Lynn.
Lynn. Maftir.
The maftir can be found. Well, we do have a special haftarah for Shabbat HaGadol. We do not have a special maftir, so it can be found on page 620, chapter 7, verse 35. Baruch hu et Adonai Amvorach.
Baruch Adonai.
Baruch Adonai Amvorach leolam va'ed. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher bachar banu mikol hamim v'natan lanu et torato. Baruch atah Adonai notein haTorah. Zot mishchat.
Amen. Zot mishchat Aharon mishchat panav me'eshe Adonai ביום הקריב אותם לכהן לאדוני אשר ציווה אדוני לתת להם ביום מושכו אותם מאת בני ישראל כלכת עולם לדורותם זאת התורה לעולה למנחה ולחטאת ולאשם ולמילואים ולזבח השלמים אשר ציווה אדוני את משה בהר סיני ביום צוותו את בני ישראל להקריב את קורבניהם לאדוני
במדבר סיני. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher natan lanu Torat emet v'chayei olam nata b'tocheinu. Baruch atah Adonai notein haTorah. As Howie does Galila, we turn now to our Haftarah, which can be found on page 1296. Page 1296. I mentioned earlier today that the reason why this week is called Shabbat HaGadol is because of the length of the rabbi's drasha. There are two Shabbatot on which the rabbi traditionally gave a drash, and those were 1044. Those were the Shabbat before Yom Kippur and the Shabbat before Pesach. I will be giving a lengthy drash. The other reason why it is called Shabbat HaGadol is because of the last words of the Haftarah, which talk about the great and terrible day of the Lord. These are the last words of prophecy in the book of prophets, our tradition's understanding as the very end of our prophetic tradition. And the last verses of prophecy are that before the great and terrible day of the Lord, which will usher in the Messianic era, God will send Elijah the prophet to restore the hearts of the children to their parents and the hearts of the parents to their children, that intergenerational healing. I might mention that some more over the course of our Pesach together. You can follow along with me on page 1296. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher bachar b'nviim tovim v'ratzav v'divrei hanemarim emet. Baruch atah Adonai habocher b'torah Moshe avdo ובישראל עמו ונביאי האמת והצדק וערבה לאדוני מנחת יהודה וירושלים כימי עולם ושנים קדמוניות וקרבתי עליכם למשפט והייתי עד ממהר במכשפים ובמנפים ובנשבעים לשקר ובעושקי שכר שכיר אלמנה ויתום ומטה גר ולא יראוני אמר אדוני צבאות כי אני אדוני לא שניתי ואתם בני יעקב לא חיליתם למימי אבותיכם סרתם מחוקי ולא שמרתם שובו אליי ואשובה עליכם אמר אדוני צבאות ואמרתם במה נשוב היקבע אדם אלוהים כי אתם קובעים אותי ואמרתם במה קבענוך המעשר והתרומה במה אתם נערים ואותי אתם קובעים הגוי כולו הביאו את כל המעשר אל בית האוצר ויטרף בביתי ובחנוני נא בזאת אמר אדוני צבאות אם לא הבטח לכם את ארובות השמיים והריקותי לכם ברכה עד בלי די וגערתי לכם באוכל ולא ישחית לכם את פרי האדמה ולא תשקל לכם הגפן בשדה אמר אדוני צבאות וישרו אתכם כל הגויים כי תהיו אתם ארץ חפץ אמר אדוני צבאות חזקו עלי דבריכם אמר אדוני ואמרתם מה נדברנו עליך אמרתם שב עבוד אלוהים ומה בצע כי שמרנו משמרתו וכי הלכנו כדורנית מפני אדוני צבאות ועתה אנחנו מאשרים זדים גם נבנו עושי רשעה גם בחנו אלוהים וימלטו אז נדברו יראי אדוני איש את רעהו ויקשב אדוני וישמע וייכתב ספר זיכרון לפניו ליראי אדוני ולחושבי שמו והיו לי אמר אדוני צבאות ליום אשר אני עושה סגולה וחמלתי עליהם כאשר יחמול איש על בנו העובד אותו ושבתם וראיתם בין צדיק לרשע בין עובד אלוהים לאשר לא עבדו הנה היום בבוער כתנור והיו כל זדים וכל עושי רשעה קש וליהט אותם היום הבא אמר אדוני צבאות אשר לא יעזוב להם שורש וענף וזרח לכם יראי שמי שמש צדקה ומרפא בכנפיה ויצאתם ופשתם כגלי מרבק ועשותם רשעים כי יהיה אפר תחת כפות רגליכם ביום אשר אני עושה אמר אדוני צבאות זכרו תורת משה עבדי אשר ציוויתי אותו בחורב על כל ישראל חוקים ומשפטים. הנה אנוכי שולח לכם את אליה הנביא לפני בוא יום אדוני הגדול והנורא. וישיב לב אבות על בנים ולב בנים על אבותם פן אבוא והכיתי את הארץ חרם. הנה אנוכי שולח לכם את אליה הנביא לפני בוא יום אדוני הגדול והנורא. ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם צור כל עולמים צדיק בכל הדורות. האל הנאמן האומר ועושה המדבר מקיים שכל דבריו אמת וצדק. נאמן אתה הוא אדוני אלוהינו ונאמנים דבריך ודבר אחד מדבריך אחור לא ישוב ריקם. כי המלך נאמן ורחמן אתה ברוך אתה אדוני האל הנאמן בכל דבריו. רחם על ציון כי בית חיינו ולהלוות נפש תושיע במהרה בימינו. ברוך אתה אדוני משמח ציון בבניה. שמחנו אדוני אלוהינו באליהו הנביא עבדך ובמלכות בית דוד משיחך. במהרה יבוא ויגל ליבנו על כיסאו לא ישב זר ולא ינחלו עוד אחרים את כבודו. כי בשם קודשך נשבעת לו שלא יכבה נרו לעולם ועד. ברוך אתה אדוני מגן דוד על התורה ועל העבודה ועל הנביאים ועל יום השבת הזה שנתת לנו אדוני אלוהינו לקדושה ולמנוחה לכבוד ולתפארת. על הכל אדוני אלוהינו אנחנו מודים לך ומברכים אותך. יתברך שמך בפי כל חי תמיד לעולם ועד. ברוך אתה אדוני מקדש השבת. As you probably know, Israel went to elections for the fourth time this year, this past week. Well, I guess the fourth time in the past 2 years. There wasn't a clear mandate in this election any more than in the previous ones. Likud, it looks like, has the largest number of seats at 30, which is more than any other party by a large portion. So Netanyahu, Bibi Netanyahu, the current prime minister, will have the first crack at forming a coalition. It seems that the natural parties to his coalition only add up to 59 seats, and he needs 61 for a coalition. There was some talk earlier in the week, right after the election, that the right-wing Arab party might join a coalition for the first time in Israel's history, but then a right-wing Jewish party said, well, I won't sit in a coalition with the right-wing Arab party, so it doesn't look like that's very likely. The most likely scenario is that Netanyahu convinces a couple of ministers from other parties to agree to sit in his coalition. That is, you're allowed to break with your party in the Israeli system. So that is very likely what's going to happen. The difficulty is it's not a very stable situation, because as soon as some issue comes up that you strongly don't want to vote on, like say you're one of the two Chavrei Knesset, members of Knesset, who agreed to sit in Netanyahu's right-wing coalition, even though you're not in a party that believes, that the majority of the party's platform believes the same things that Netanyahu believes. So as soon as there's an issue that comes up that you feel more strongly connected to your party than to the coalition, you vote with your party, which dissolves the coalition, which sends the government back into new elections. And if you're a politician, a career politician, it doesn't make sense to put yourself in a position where you're voting with Netanyahu against your party if you know that there are going to be elections within the next few months anyway, because you don't want to compromise your integrity just for the sake of a stable government when it's not even that stable. So basically, Netanyahu has an uphill road in terms of putting together a coalition. That said, we can continue to hope and pray that Israel remains in a position of strength relative to its ability to defend itself. And we can hope and pray that Israel remains in a position of compassion relative to the non-Israelis who live within the borders of their dominion. And we can pray and hope that the non-government government that it seems to be currently running Israel for the last 14 or so months continues with some ability to function so that they're able to continue to vaccinate and take care of our Israeli brothers and sisters, and to make sure that everybody is safe and cared for, and that the functions of government continue. I sort of think to myself, wow, our system is very crazy, and then I look at other systems and I'm like, well, it doesn't seem like there's an end to the craziness. It feels like there are a lot of bad options, and I think it was Winston Churchill who said, well, democracy is the best of a bad lot. So there are different ways to think about it. Certainly we can pray for peace and security and justice in the land of Israel. With that, I invite everybody to turn to page 416 as we say the prayer for the state of Israel. Page 416. Avinu Shabashamayim, Sur Yisrael v'goalo, Varechen Medinat Yisrael, Reshit Smichat Geulatenu. Hagen Alea be'evrat chasdecha, Ufros Alea sukat shlomecha, Ushlach orcha v'mitcha l'roshea, Sarea v'yoatzea. V'taknem be'itza tova milfanecha. Chazek et yedei miginei eretz kochenu, V'anchilem Eloheinu Yeshua, V'ater et nitzachon tatrem, V'natata shalom ba'aretz, V'simchat olam li'oshvea, V'nomar Amen. We continue with the service for putting the Torah back in the ark. With Ashrei on page 420.
Ashrei v'techa u'jehalu chasela.
Ashrei am shekachalo, Ashrei am sharanai Eloham.
Tehillah leDavid, al mimcha lahai, hamelech v'barcha shimcha le'olam va'ed. Gadol Adonai mul ha'mehod, v'likdu atel hein cheker. Hadar kevod hodecha, v'divrei niflotecha asicha. Zecher havtucha yabihu, v'sitkatcha hiranenu. Tov Adonai la kol bracha mava kol mahasav. Kevod malchutecha yomeru ugavurotecha yedaberu. Malchutecha malchut kol amim umemshotecha bechol dor vador. Einei cholecha yisaberu ve'ata noten lahem et ochlam be'ito. Tzadik Adonai bechol derecha v'chasid bechol ma'asav. Ritzon Yerehav Yaseh B'yad Shavatan Yishma V'yoshim. Tehilat Adonai Yedaber Pi V'varech Kol Basar Shem Kodsho El Hamvad.
ואנחנו נברך מעכשיו ועד עולם. Hallelujah. We rise for returning the Sefer Torah to the Ark.
Yehalelu et Shem Adonai, ki nizgav shemo levado. Hodo al eretz v'shamayim, vayarem keren leyamo. Tehillah lecho hasidav, lifnei Yisrael am kerovo. Hallelujah, hallelujah. Please, Lord, love you.
Abu Adonai.
Uvrucha Yomar. Eitz Chaim Him Lemavazikim V'tohecha Meusar
Kadesh, Kadesh Yameinu, Kadesh Yameinu Kekedem. Shabbat Shalom. Welcome to Congregation Agudat Achim's in-person and live stream Shabbat morning service. It's a pleasure to join with you, whether you're here in the room or joining us and participating by live stream. A Yasher Koach to Howie for reading Torah, and to Aryeh for leading us in Shachrit, and a Yasher Koach in advance to Orit for leading us in Musa. I mentioned I was going to give a lengthy drasha, so here it is. It is traditional to discuss halakha, Jewish law, on the Shabbat before Passover and the Shabbat before Yom Kippur, specifically the laws of Passover and the laws of Yom Kippur, so that the congregation is well informed and able to observe the laws to the letter. Of course, there's a weird thing that happened this year, which hasn't happened since 1994. Which hasn't happened since 1994. It's a situation which only happens 12% of the time. And that is Erev Pesach falls on Shabbat. And so Shabbat HaGadol, the Shabbat where you discourse on the laws of Pesach, is in fact Erev Pesach. So there's no practical purpose to my discoursing on the laws of Pesach, because either you prepared correctly or you didn't prepare correctly. It is all done. I was talking to my mother, Rabbi Miriam Spitzer, yesterday, and we were both talking about this weird phenomenon of how this Shabbat doesn't seem to be the right time to do a full discourse on the laws of Pesach, and how just like it's customary to move the beginning of Slichot when Rosh Hashanah falls on Sunday night or Monday night, we actually move Slichot to the previous Saturday night so that we have a full week of Slichot, and not to do Slichot, which are the special penitential prayers before Rosh Hashanah. We don't do them just for one night. We move them and do them for a whole week. And so my mother and I were suggesting that maybe in situations where Passover falls on Erev Pesach, where on Motzei Shabbos, where Erev Pesach is Shabbat, that we should actually do Shabbat HaGadol the week before and discourse at length on the laws of Pesach, with enough time for people for it to have a practical ramification. On the other hand, there's something really nice about the idea of learning some halacha, some Jewish law, without worrying about whether you did it right or wrong. Just release yourself from it and say, this is really interesting, and I'm going to be able to learn from these halachot, from these Jewish laws in another year, but not to worry about this year. Erev Pesach fell on Shabbat 12 times in the 20th century. As I mentioned, the last occurrence was 1994. It's going to occur 12 times in the 21st century. And this is the first one. And it's also going to occur 4 years from now in 2025. And then after that, it won't happen until 2045. So the laws that I'm going to go over today are also not very commonly relevant, but they do apply this year. The first question that comes up is when to do the fast of the firstborn. Yosef Karo, the author of the Shulchan Aruch, says that once the fast of the firstborn is postponed or deferred because of Shabbat, which usually the fast of the firstborn would be on Erev Pesach, that is today, the 14th of Nisan. When it happens that falls on Shabbat, we don't fast on Shabbat except for Yom Kippur. Rabbi Yosef Karo says that there is no need, therefore, to fast at all. The fast of the firstborn is completely nullified. On the other hand, Rabbi Moses Isserlis, the author of the Ashkenazi gloss on the Shulchan Aruch. The Shulchan Aruch is our main code of Jewish law that was written by Yosef Karo in the 16th century. Karo represents the Sephardi positions, but the Shulchan Aruch is never published without the gloss of the Ashkenazi posek, Moses Isserlis, who was from Poland. According to the Ramah, Moses Isserlis, the fast is moved up to the preceding Thursday. And therefore the Ashkenazi custom is to hold a Siyum Masechet on Thursday, the 12th of Nisan, so that the firstborn may participate in the festive occasion and therefore eat. This week we did that, in fact, and Orit Sheng and Rachel Schmidt concluded their study of Masechet Moed Katan. Very fittingly, Masechet Moed Katan deals with the laws of Chol HaMoed, of the intermediate days of the holiday. Passover, as you know, has 2 days of Yom Tov at the beginning and 2 days of Yom Tov at the end, and then intermediate days. And the question is, what what aspects of those days are like Yom Tov, and what aspects of those days are like Chol, are like weekday. It was a wonderful siyum, and as a result, those of us who are firstborns were able to eat. The second issue about when Shabbat falls on Erev Pesach is the issue of the search for chametz. The search for chametz is usually done the night before Pesach, which would have been last night, Friday night. Because it is done with a candle, a feather, and a spoon, we do not do it on Shabbat. It's inappropriate to be searching for chametz on Shabbat, and certainly by the time Shabbat comes in, all of your chametz is supposed to have been dealt with already. So that also gets moved to Thursday night. And the chametz is burned on Friday morning. While it is true that the chametz may be burned all day on Friday, because Friday is not in fact Erev Pesach, it is not the day before Pesach, so you actually have all day on Friday to burn the chametz. It's preferable to burn by the correct time that you would have had to burn it if it had actually been Erev Pesach, which this year was 11:44. And the reason that we do that is so that next year you won't make a mistake and accidentally think that you have all day to burn your chametz. So chametz had to have been burned yesterday by 11:44, which is the 5th hour of the day. Now I'm going to get to the main challenge of Erev Pesach that falls on Shabbat in a moment, but before I do, there's a weird thing that happens in this kind of situation, which is that when you do the burning of the chametz, you do not say the blessing of nullification because you might still be eating chametz on Shabbat. But we have now reached the time on Shabbat where it is no longer permissible to eat chametz. That would have been 10:27 a.m. Just a little while ago. And the last possible time to destroy the chametz in a Shabbat-friendly way, such as flushing it down the toilet, is 11:44 a.m., which is in a few minutes. So we are now going to recite together the formula for nullification, so that anybody who didn't do it themselves can do it with us together as a community. Kol chamira v'chamia de'ika virshuti, dechazite udala chazite, dechamite udala chamite, deviarte udala viarte, libatel ulaheve hefker ka'afra da'ara. Now you'll notice that sounds like Hebrew but a little different. That's Aramaic. The reason why it's in Aramaic is because it had to be in a language that you understand. And most of the people who lived at the time that this formula was written understood Aramaic, but not necessarily Hebrew. Nowadays, ironically, more people understand Hebrew than understand Aramaic, but we, in fact, do this line in Aramaic anyway because of custom. But it doesn't actually take effect unless you say it in a language that you understand. So we will also say it in English. May all leaven which is in my possession, which I have observed or which I have not observed, right? Whether I saw it or whether I didn't see it, which I have removed or have not removed, be regarded as null and be ownerless property as the dust of the earth. So, everybody who has heard me say this should repeat that their chametz is considered nullified. It is past the time where you can eat chametz, and you should make sure that you can't see any chametz in your house. As it says, Lo yira'eh se'or b'vatechem, you shall not see the chametz in your house. Now the biggest issue with Shabbat on Erev Pesach is the issue of what to eat for Shabbat. On the one hand, according to Rabbi Levi from the Talmud Yerushalmi, matzah may not be eaten Erev Pesach. By the way, not only should matzah not be eaten Erev Pesach, but there are many customs which say that you can't eat matzah, or you should not eat matzah, for the whole month between Purim and Pesach, or some authorities say between Rosh Chodesh Nisan and Pesach, and certainly everybody says in the few days before Passover you should not eat matzah. All of the major poskim, all of the major legal decisors, Rambam, the Shulchan Aruch, the Ramah, everybody, they all rule that you may not eat matzah on Erev Pesach. On the other hand, it is a mitzvah for each of the Shabbat meals, at least the first two, but some authorities say all three. And remember that on Shabbat, it's a mitzvah to eat 3 meals. The mitzvah is to have two whole loaves at each of the meals, at least the first 2, but some people also say the 3rd meal. The reason why we have 2 whole loaves is because it reminds us of the fact that in the desert, when they collected the man on Friday, they got a double portion on Friday. So we make sure to have a double portion of challah. When you say motzi on Shabbat, you should say it on 2 complete loaves. And it's very difficult to keep chalot for hamotzi in your house after all of the chametz has been removed. Furthermore, chametz may not be eaten after the 4th hour of the day on Shabbat morning. So by the time you get to lunchtime, it's too late to eat your challah. So there's a question: if you can't eat challah and you can't eat matzah, which are the 2 kinds of bread which are considered loaves for making motzi, what do you do? Indeed, this situation is mentioned in the Mishnah, in Mishnah Psachim, chapter 3, law number 6, and it's mentioned in the Tosefta, which is the additional material from the same time period as the Mishnah, but which didn't make it into the Mishnah. And it's mentioned in the Babylonian Talmud, but these sources are not sufficiently clear about what you should do. And therefore, 5 different solutions have been developed. I'm going to go through each of the solutions. Rabbi Yitzchak ibn Giyat, who lived in Spain in the 11th century, ignored the above-mentioned Yerushalmi and ruled that matzah should be eaten on Shabbat, Erev Pesach. Rabbeinu Yitzchak ibn Giyat wrote, the custom in Lucena was to burn all chametz before Shabbat, to bake matzah on Friday, and to eat it on Shabbat, and after Shabbat, they bake matzah and use it to fulfill the mitzvah of al-achilat matzah. In other words, I guess they really did make special matzah that was just for Shabbat, that was separate from the matzah that they would use to eat at Seder, and they made the matzah that they used to eat at Seder right after Shabbat ended and before they began their Seder. I guess they did Seder very late at night. Rabbi Yitzchak ibn Giyat does not give a source for this opinion. But other early halachic authorities noted that he must have been relying on a Tosefta. The Tosefta says, when the 14th falls on Shabbat, all chametz is burned before Shabbat, and he bakes matzah for himself on Erev Shabbat. Now, if I just read that Tosefta, I would assume that the matzah that he's baking on Erev Shabbat is for Passover, not for Shabbat. But Yitzchak ibn Giyat, Rabbi Ephraim of Kala Hamed, the Rivanin, and Rabbi Aaron HaKohen of Lunel explained that the matzah that he bakes is on Erev Shabbat in order to eat on Shabbat, not in order to eat it for Seder. This opinion has all but disappeared over the course of time, probably because there are other ways to interpret that Tosefta, and because the Yerushalmi says very explicitly that we should not eat. When I say the Yerushalmi, I mean the Talmud Yerushalmi. There are two Talmuds, the Yerushalmi, Jerusalem Talmud, and the Babylonian Talmud. The Jerusalem Talmud is also considered authoritative, even though most of our laws come from the Babylonian Talmud. So that's the first method. Generally, people do not do this. Generally, nowadays, it is considered improper to eat matzah on Erev Pesach. The second method, by the way, not everybody agrees on what matzah is. Some people say that matzah is only dry matzah from a box, but if you take matzah meal and mix it in to a kugel, that's okay to eat on Erev Pesach, because it doesn't look like matzah. Even there are some people who say that matzah balls are okay to eat on Erev Pesach. My own family custom is to not eat anything that has matzah in it from Purim to Passover. So to me, the idea then of eating a kugel that has matzah in it, matzah meal in it, on Erev Pesach seems outrageous. But not everybody agrees on that. So I just wanted to be very clear that some people will eat matzah balls on Erev Pesach. The second method is based on the passage from the Babylonian Talmud, Psachim 13a. As it is taught in a Braita, when the 14th falls on Shabbat, all chametz is burned before Shabbat, and some of the food is left over for 2 meals that should be eaten before the 4th hour on Shabbat. Indeed, this is how the major poskim ruled. The Rambam ruled this way. The Shulchan Aruch ruled this way. Yosef Karo adds that for Sudah Shlishit, the 3rd Shabbat meal, matzah ashira, that is to say egg matzah, should be used, provided that Sudah Shlishit is eaten before the 10th hour of the day, so that one will have an appetite to eat matzah at the Seder. Likewise, the chametz must be nullified by reciting the Kol Chamira formula on Shabbat morning by the end of the 5th hour, just as it is done every year. So that's the custom that I think people should do. It's from the Rambam. Feels like it makes a lot of sense to me, which is to say, to hold over 2 very small challahs, or 3 very small challahs, so that you can have 2 for Friday night, and eat one of them in its entirety, and then you have 2 for Shabbat morning, and you have your Shabbat morning meal, your second meal of Shabbat, before coming to Shul on Shabbat, and you eat the other 2 chalot also in their entirety. This is what we did as a family this morning. We did Kiddush and Motzi before coming to Shul. We did our Shabbat second meal before synagogue, and we completely consumed the chalot that we had left out for that purpose. Removed all of the crumbs. This method has been in practice for generations, but it is problematic, as can be seen from a description of it by Rabbi Chaim David Halevi, who is actually one of its proponents. And this is our custom. On Friday, the 13th of Nisan, all the chametz is burned and all the utensils used for chametz concealed as if it were the 14th of Nisan. And all of the cooking for Shabbat is done using Pesach utensils. That is what we did. A small amount of chametz is left over, preferably pitas or rolls that do not make crumbs, and immediately after Kiddush, they crowd around a designated corner on a separate table, eat the amount of bread required at a Shabbat meal, with a vegetable salad and the like, shake out their clothes very well and remove the tablecloth and the table, and then sit down at the main Shabbat table and eat kosher Pesach foods on kosher Pesach dishes and recite Birkat HaMazon at the conclusion of the meal. We had our tablecloth pulled up so that we would eat the chametz on our chametz stick table, and then we put the tablecloth out and put our Passover dishes out. On the following morning, eat as described above, at a regular full breakfast using disposable plates and cutlery, and say Birkat Hamazon. Afterwards, destroy the chametz by throwing it in a public place, and then recite the normal nullification. In the afternoon, mincha is recited early, and you eat sudash lishit with meat and fish without bread or matzah. So that is our custom. That is to say, to eat a third meal on Shabbat that doesn't include bread. So, and like I said, some people say that you should always eat a lighter third meal on Shabbat, and some people say that you should have motzi at every meal, at every Shabbat meal. But even if you have to have motzi at every Shabbat meal, you do not have to have 2 chalot to be able to do it. And if you didn't have those extra chalot, to just have a third meal with the size of an egg would be sufficient to fulfill your mitzvah of having a third meal on Shabbat. So in our case, we will have our third meal at lunchtime, and we are having fish and salad. It's a balsamic glazed salmon, for those of you who are wondering. However, Rabbi Eliyahu Chazan already noted the difficulties in this method when he served as the chief rabbi of Tripoli, and he said, Erev Pesach falls on Shabbat, and my soul is so anguished over the prohibitions which occurred this Shabbat due to the eating of chametz, because they could not be extremely careful about the crumbs and the sweeping the house and the like. In addition, the joy of Shabbat HaGadol is prevented because they will eat between the stove and the oven and the like, and also because on Shabbat they pray at a very late hour, and we have to worry about the time for nullifying the chametz will pass, God forbid. In other words, there are challenges with this position, even though it is my favorite of the options. Rabbi Ovadia Yosef proposes a third method. Matzah that has been cooked in chicken or meat soup. After the soup has been cooked, remove it from the burner, and while the soup is still hot enough to burn the hand, put several matzot, enough for one's needs, in the soup, one after the other, in such a way that the matzah fully absorbs the taste of the soup. And then it may be used to fulfill the mitzvah of the 3 meals. It is best not to remove the matzot from the soup until it cools off, so that the matzot can be removed whole and not fall apart in the soup, so that they can be broken on Shabbat and used for hamotzi and birkat hamazon. Remember that the idea here is you have to have a full loaf, which means an unbroken matzah. Now, I have put matzah in soup, and I have never ever managed to put matzah in soup and have that piece come out whole and unbroken. The idea that Rabbi Ovadia Yosef thinks that this is possible leads me to believe that it was somebody else in the kitchen and not him. He goes on to say that Friday night it is permissible to use regular matzah because the prohibition of the Yerushalmi of eating matzah on Erev Pesach only applies on the day of Erev Pesach and not the night before. From a halachic perspective, his method is valid, but it's not at all practical because most people will not want to engage in the complicated process of trying to dry out your soup-soaked matzahs. This, by the way, goes back to this idea that what actually constitutes matzah for the purposes of the blessing ala chilat matzah that you do at Seder. Clearly, the matzah that is soaked in your soup is not acceptable for the use of ala chilat matzah. And that's why it's okay to eat, according to Rabbi Ovadia Yosef, on Erev Pesach. Because you can't use it also for the mitzvah of matzah. To me, this feels strained. So here's the fourth method. This was suggested by Rabbi Yaakov Betzalel Zolti, who was the chief rabbi of Jerusalem. He maintained that the Yerushalmi is only opposed to eating matzah on Erev Pesach if that matzah could be used at the Seder. Egg matzah may be eaten on Erev Pesach precisely because it may not be used at the Seder. Similarly, if before baking the matzah for Pesach we explicitly say that it is not for the purpose of fulfilling the matzah of eating matzah at Seder, then it could be eaten on Erev Pesach. And he states that he and Rabbi Eliashiv actually arranged for such matzot to be baked in 1981. This method is not convincing for two reasons. It is ingenious. That is to say, the idea of each community should have a place where they bake matzah that is not for the purpose of Seder, specifically so that you can eat it on Erev Pesach. It ignores, of course, the plain meaning of the words that Rabbi Levi said in the Yerushalmi, which is, you may not eat matzah on Erev Pesach. Rabbi Levi was opposed to eating matzah on Erev Pesach because he did not conquer his desire to wait until the evening to eat matzah. In other words, matzah is supposed to be special for Seder. If you're eating even matzah that was specifically prepared with the intention that it shouldn't be used at Seder on Erev Pesach, it's like saying that you're not able to wait for the Seder. You should wait for the Seder. If some rabbi arranges to bake some special matzah, most of us will not have access to it. Right? That is to say, so somebody has a kiln somewhere that they're making special matzahs just for this Shabbat, but how are they going to distribute them to everybody in the world? So there's a fifth approach. The fifth approach is the simplest method. It is not my preferred method, but it is the simplest method. It is the preferred method of many halachic poskim, including the preparers of our luach, and also including Rabbi Roy Feldman of Beth Abe in Albany. And the fifth approach is to use egg matzah. Rabbi Yosef Karo actually brings this up, but he rejects it. One should not object that one should destroy all chametz before Shabbat and leave nothing on Shabbat and eat matzah shira, egg matzah, since not every person is able to make egg matzah for all 3 years, and therefore the rabbis did not trouble us with this. So in other words, it seems that the only reason why Yosef Karo says you shouldn't do this is because he's worried about not everybody being able to. But in today's world, you can easily buy egg matzah, so you should be able to. In other words, if it were possible for every person to bake egg matzah, Yosef Karo would have agreed to this, because egg matzah is neither chametz nor matzat mitzvah, which can be used at the Seder, and therefore it can be eaten on Erev Pesach. Indeed, this was the custom in Izmir, Turkey, in the 19th century, according to the testimony of Rabbi Chaim Palench. He favored this practice because if chametz remained, it would be difficult to get rid of the crumbs, and a person would not be able to eat calmly on a carefully laid table with a clean tablecloth, and the chametz foods would be cold. This was also the practice followed by the above-mentioned Rabbi Eliyahu Chazan. He refrained from imposing on the people to make egg matzah, but did disclose his practice to several scholars in the hopes that perhaps in so doing the custom will work its way into practice. Rabbi Moshe Feinstein, who is one of the great legal deciders of the Orthodox community in this country in the 20th century, he wrote, "Therefore it is good for those who do not wish to leave chametz in their house on Shabbat out of concern for the possible obstacles that may arise from this to fulfill the mitzvah of the 2 Shabbat meals using egg matzah." The approach of Rabbi Moshe Feinstein was well received by various halakhic authorities, and it has been done. As for Sudah Shlishit, it is of course possible to be stringent, like the Ramah, and to eat only fruit and meat or fish. There are also some approaches that say that it is okay to be lenient and to use egg matzah, because that is what Rabbi Yosef Karo would have done. It is permissible to eat egg matzah on Erev Pesach all day if there is a small need, even if it is not for a sick or elderly person. Therefore, it is permissible to eat egg matzah even at Sudah Shlishit. Here's my problem with egg matzah. It looks like matzah. People even think it is matzah. And it is true that it is the Ashkenazi custom that you should not eat egg matzah on Pesach. Certainly not for Seder, but not for any reason on Pesach, unless you are sick or elderly and you need to be able to digest the food better and you can't eat regular matzah, then you can eat egg matzah, but not for the purpose of fulfilling the mitzvah. And it is not our custom to eat egg matzah on Pesach Now, Sephardi communities do eat egg matzah on Pesach, but Ashkenazi communities do not. And so it feels weird to eat egg matzah, which looks like matzah, on Erev Pesach. In conclusion, there are two possibilities: to hold over some small chametz rolls or pitot and to eat them on Friday night and Shabbat morning before coming to synagogue, and everything else that you eat should be prepared on Passover dishes, or to use egg matzah for the meals of Shabbat. Either of these are acceptable halachically, and obviously it's already what's done is done for this year, but in 4 years we're going to have to do this again in 2025, so it will be useful to you for that. With that, my discourse on the laws of Passover is over. Shabbat Hagadol, the great discourse. I did go longer than I usually do, so we can all check, and we will continue with the Musaf service, which can be found on page 428. That's you, Orit. Orit's going to lead us in Chatzi Kaddish, followed by the Amidah. We'll go with her through the Kedusha on page 432, and then continue with the individual whispered Amidah. We rise for Chatzi Kaddish, page 428.
Yikadav yikadav shemei rabbah Ve'amad yifrach yiruteh Ve'amlich malchuteh Ve'chai echonu Yomeicham Ufayid echol Beit Yisrael Ba'gala Ba'gala Ubizman ka'ariv V'meru amen Yehi shmei Rabba mevorach Le'alam o'med mahayah Yiparach v'yishtabach v'yitbar v'yitramah v'yitnaseh Yitadar v'yitaleh v'yitalel shemei l'kudeshah Le'ela mikol berchata v'shirata Tushbechata v'nechemata Taham mihiram v'yamach V'meru
If you haven't completed your individual whispered Amidah, please continue davening. We join together for Kaddish Shalem, page 506. Amen.
Be'alma divrach yurte, be'amlich machete, b'chayechon yumechon, b'chayeda kol beit Yisrael, b'alo avizman kri v'himeru.
Amen. Yehi shmei Rabba mefarach, le'alam na'al me'almaya, yitbarach.
Yiparach v'yishtabach v'yipar v'yitramam v'yitnaseh, yitadar v'yitala v'yitala shemede kudesha.
Berichu.
Le'ela mikol berchata v'shirata, tizbechata v'nechamata, v'amiram b'alma v'himeru.
Amen.
Tika belto hona v'hon, dechol Yisrael kadam v'hon yishamaya v'imeru.
Amen.
Yehehe shlama rabba min shamaya v'chayim alinu v'yakol Yisrael v'himeru.
Amen.
Ahoseh shalom b'mrumav, hu yaseh shalom. Alenu v'yakol Yisrael v'imeru.
Amen. We continue with Aleinu, page 500 and, oh wait. Before Aleinu, I just wanted to wish a happy birthday to the following individuals who are celebrating their birthday this week. To Josh, Lily, and Ryan Harrow, whose 13th birthday is today. Mazel Tov. Their B'nai Mitzvah is the next one that we're celebrating together as a community in April. A Mazel Tov also to Michelle Kahn, and to David Brown, Mira Stashauer, Abraham Finkel, and Abigail Simtonzi. A Mazel Tov to all of you on your birthdays this week. And also a Mazel Tov to Karen and Alan Perlman, who are celebrating their anniversary this week. Mazel Tov. We continue with Aleinu, page 510. Please rise.
Alenu l'shabeach l'adon hakol, l'atei gedula le'otzer breshit, shelo asanu gai haratzo, velo samanu k'mishpachot adama, shelo samchakinu kahem, v'gohor alenu k'chol hamonah, ve'anachnu korim, u'mishtachavim u'modim, lifnei melech malchei hamalchim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Kakatuv b'toratecha Adonai yimloch le'olam va'ed v'ne'emar Adonai l'melech ha'kol ha'aretz b'yom ha'hu yiyeh Adonai echad u'shemo echad.
Congregation honors with love the memory of the following individuals who have gone to their eternal rest. Richard Mendelson passed away a week ago Friday night, and his Shiva was this week. Our deep condolences to the Mendelson family. The following individuals are remembered this week for their yartzites: Thomas Kernis, Jack Rotman, Susan Smolnick, Edward Korn, Max Weiner, Lucille Diamond, Fanny Fine, Inge Woods, Martin Burnby, Gregory Osheroff, Anna Rotman, Muriel Shapiro, Minna Siegel, Anna Spade, George Strickman, Cecilia Block, and Hilda Luft. In solemn testimony to the unbroken chain of faith which links one generation of the house of Israel to the next, those who mourn and those who are observing Yartzeit now rise to magnify and sanctify God's name with the words of Kaddish Avelim, Mourner's Kaddish, page 512. Yit Gadal, Bit Kadash, Shemei Rabbah, Be'alma Divra Kirutei, Be'amlich Malchutei, V'chayechon Uvyomechon Uv'chayei Dechol Beit Yisrael, Ba'agalau Vizman Kariv V'imru Amen. Yehi Shmei Rabbah Mevarach Le'alam Olamei Almaya. Yitbarach V'yishtabach V'yitpa'ar V'yitromam V'yitnaseh V'yitadar V'yitaleh V'yitalal Shmei Dekudesha B'richu Le'ela Min Kol Birchata V'shirata Tushbechata V'nechmata Damiran Be'alma V'imru Amen. Yehi Shlama Rabbah Min Shemaya V'chayim Aleinu Ve'al Kol Yisrael V'imru Amen. Oseh Shalom Mimromav Hu Yaseh Shalom Aleinu Ve'al Kol Yisrael V'imru Amen. I think Steve's going to offer some announcements on behalf of the board.
Good morning, good Shabbos to everyone out on live stream. We'd like to welcome Rabbi Spitzer back from his family leave. Nice to have you with us again. It was a short leave. I hope it was a good one. I hope you did not spend all of it in the kitchen.
Pretty much.
But probably a lot of it. There really is only one announcement, which is that Passover starts tonight. That has a few quick implications. There are no Havdalah hangout tonight because you should be doing your Seder, but Shabbat goes out at 7:58. Morning services on both Sunday and Monday are by live stream, not by Zoom because of the holiday, and I believe that means no afternoon services those days.
That's right.
Right? But afternoon services will return on Tuesday, as will morning by Zoom. The only other thing, ongoing activities continue. Rabbi Spitzer's Parsha of the Week class will be back on Tuesday. Intermediate Hebrew, Rabbi's Prayer Book class will begin on April 18th, so there's still time to register for that. There is a Scholar in Your Residence, Judaism and Science, Advancing the U.S.-Israel Relationship Through Science and Technology. That's Thursday, the 1st of April, 7:30 on Zoom. Hope to see people there. And I want to just wish everybody Zis and Pesach, good, enjoy the rest of Shabbat. May you have meaningful Seders.
Yeah. As I mentioned earlier, we didn't have a minyan this morning when we started at 9:45. We are planning to start tomorrow and Monday morning at 9:45, so if you're planning to come, please come on time so that we have a minyan. There's a lot to do with Hallel and Musaf and celebrating, reading from Shir HaShirim, Song of Songs, and celebrating Passover, so it would be good for us to have a quorum early on. We conclude our service with Adon Olam, page 514.
Adon Olam Asher Malach
B'terem kol Yitzir Nira Li'ei Nasa B'chefzo kol V'melech Shemo Nikra V'yacharei Kifrot HaKol V'ado Yimloch Nora V'hu Haya V'hu Hoveh V'hu Yiyeh B'tifara V'hu Echad V'yein Sheni Hamshilo Lehachmira Veli Reshit, Veli Tachlit, Velo Haoz, V'hamisra, Vehu Eli, V'chaydovi, V'tzor Chavli, V'yetzara, V'unisi, Umanosli, Menakosi, V'yomekra, V'yado Akidru, Tishan ve'ya'ira ve'imruchi gevi'ati Adonai li v'lo yira. Shabbat Shalom. Yashakua. Welcome, Mackenzie. Let's go.
I thought we had left it that I would work it out, and then I didn't get back to you to say, yes, we did work it out.
Yeah, I just didn't know whether we had.
I understand.
I didn't want to embarrass somebody.
Got it.
Shabbat Shalom. I hope you all enjoyed my lengthy discourse.